Hey guys, Caleb here. Welcome back to the channel. In this video, we're going to do something a little different. We're going to take all of the camera brands and we're going to rank them from best to worst. So you can see on my screen here, I've got a list from A to F, A being pretty much perfect, F being needs a lot of work, and then we've got our camera brands down at the bottom. Before we dive into the list, there's a couple things I want to disclaim. Number one, no camera companies pay me for anything or have sponsored this video or know anything about this video. This is all my opinion. Thing to keep in mind. Number two, I have owned or currently own a camera from every one of these brands with exception to one. Thing number three, I'm ranking these brands by the cameras that they make that are under $5,000 and in this kind of entry-level cine/mirrorless video form factor. So we're not talking about still photography, we're talking about video. Thing to keep in mind. Number four is that just because I rank some of these companies lower doesn't mean you shouldn't buy them. Most of the cameras that I own actually land in the middle to low area of this list. And finally, all of this is my opinion, so don't get offended unless you place all of your security in what other people think about your camera. So now let's dive into ranking. We're gonna start by ranking all of the camera brands. Then I'm gonna go back through the brands and talk about how they could go from wherever they're placed to A or the best or perfect. So here I've got the list. You can see A through F. So let's go ahead and start placing them, starting with Canon. When it comes to Canon, we are going to be placing that in the B bracket. And by the way, none of these brands are going to be in the A bracket because that would mean they're perfect. We're gonna save that for when we talk about what each of these companies can do to improve their camera systems and their offerings as a whole. Canon makes great cameras and they've come a long way when it comes to video. But the reason I'm not putting Canon in the perfect or A rank is because they still have overheating problems, especially the newest crop of cameras. And there's that 30-minute record time, which still blows my mind that in 2021, we're still dealing with this issue. So those are a couple of reasons why they are not in the A rank. Moving right along, let's jump into talking about Blackmagic design. Originally, I had Blackmagic ranked as C, but I decided to move it down to D. And I know this is going to get a lot of people upset, but bear with me and hear me out. I really do think that Blackmagic is leading the industry when it comes to compressed RAW, as well as a ton of other video features. They're doing amazing, amazing things. That said, if I were going to rank these higher, there are two big issues I have with Blackmagic. Number one is form factor. These cameras are crazy bulky and they're just not nice to use out of the box. You got to work on them a lot. The second reason is going to be autofocus. And I know a lot of you are going to be like, cinema cameras don't need autofocus. A lot of these companies are doing amazing work with autofocus. And I really do think the next several generations are going to transition over to using more interesting technology when it comes to focus. So that's a big one for Blackmagic. And don't get me wrong, I love Blackmagic. I have 3 of their cameras. They're great, but there are some things I think they could do to improve upon them, and we'll talk about that a little later. Next up, we have Fujifilm. I really enjoy Fujifilm cameras, and when it comes to their overall ranking, I'm going to place Fujifilm in the C row. And there's a couple reasons it's not higher. For me, it's going to be lenses, specifically lenses that are really good at video autofocus. And I've noticed on my Fuji cameras, X-T4, X-T3, that there's just a lot of focus bugs. I'm constantly fighting the autofocus system. Don't get me wrong, it's better than a lot of the other cameras we're gonna be talking about, but it just definitely still needs some work. Next up, we have Zcam, and I'm going to place Zcam right up there with Blackmagic as a D rank. Zcam is really interesting because they're not like a lot of the other camera manufacturers. They have kind of their own thing going on, and they don't make bad cameras, or they're not a bad brand. But I just think with a lot of the other options that are available to us, I'm less enticed to go with Zcam. I think they could do a lot of work when it comes to their post workflow. And again, when you look at companies like Blackmagic, who has an amazing workflow, Blackmagic RAW is incredible. Zcam maybe doesn't quite live up to that. One thing I do love about Zcam is the form factor, and I honestly just wish Blackmagic would just completely copy or come up with a similar design and better materials. Zcam cameras are much stronger compared to these plasticky cameras from Blackmagic. That said, if Blackmagic improved their form factor and gave us a full frame camera, Zcam might be in trouble. Next up, we're going to talk about Sony, and for Sony, I'm going to be ranking it as a B company or brand. So I'm actually going to move it up and I'm going to slide Canon over and put Sony first, because I really do think that at the time of this recording, Sony offers the best system when you're looking at video. They have several cameras now, including the A7S III and the A7 IV, that offer 10-bit recording in 4K with a ton of features. Their autofocus is great, and their lens lineup has come a really, really long way. There's one thing I think they could do to bump up into the A rank, and we'll talk about that here in a little bit. Next, we're going to talk about Panasonic. A lot of you know I'm a Panasonic boy. I love their cameras. You're watching me through a Panasonic camera right now, but when it comes to what they're making when it comes to video, I'm gonna have to put them in the C category. I would take them over Fuji, so I'm going to move things around here a little bit. And honestly, there's only one reason why Panasonic isn't ranked higher, and that is autofocus. We all have been saying it for years now. If Panasonic wants to play the long game and compete, they're just going to have to improve their autofocus when it comes to video. But just imagine a world where Panasonic has amazing autofocus similar to the likes of Sony and Canon. It would be incredible, because I think, in my opinion, Panasonic's video features across the board in other categories completely crushes the competition. Their video features and assist features are just feature loaded. They have one of the best image stabilization systems, I think, amongst all these different companies. So if they can get that figured out, they're gold. Next up, we have Team Yellow or Nikon. And this one makes me really sad. So we're going to go ahead and put Nikon in the E rank. There's nothing really wrong with Nikon necessarily. You know, they've been around forever. They make good lenses, but they're just boring compared to what everyone else is doing. And I just feel like they're just kind of floating along with life. And the thing that kills me is, of many of these camera brands, they have nothing to lose by doing a really solid video style camera. So why not make a video focused camera and do what Sony and Canon can't, because they have other cameras that they need to protect. There's nothing really wrong with them, aside from the fact that they still don't have flip out screens. There's so many better options in my opinion. And finally, we have Sigma, and you might be guessing where this is about to head, and you'd be right. We're gonna have to put Sigma in the F ranking. And there's a simple reason for this. They only have, what, 2 cameras when it comes to kind of a video-centric option, the FP and the FPL, both of which for a first try I think are really, really interesting, but as a whole, they've got a long way to go when it comes to competing with these other companies. For starters, while it shoots Cinema DNG RAW internal, external RAW is just not very good on these cameras, and there's no way to record an H.264 10-bit, codec on the inside of this camera. That said, I love the form factor, and I can't wait to see what they come up with next. I really hope they keep making cameras, because it just is super fascinating and exciting to me. So now that we've ranked each of these camera manufacturers, let's go ahead and talk about how they could go from where they're standing right now to A or perfect. We're gonna work backwards. So we're gonna start with Sigma. They have a long way to go to get up to A. But like some companies on this list, they don't have anything to cannibalize when it comes to their cameras. So they can make anything they want, and it's not going to compete with themselves. So I would love to see them either improve the FP as it is, or make it slightly larger and give us stuff that other companies aren't going to be willing to do. Next, we're going to take a look at Nikon. Honestly, just make a camera that is designed for video, go balls to the wall with it, because like Sigma, you have no video department that you can cannibalize. So just go nuts, do something that's interesting. Panasonic has a very hard thing to do, but it's only one, and that is to improve autofocus or change the system or something. Give us really, really good, rock solid, continuous autofocus. And in my opinion, that would definitely make them a serious contender against Canon and Sony. Next, let's talk about Sony and how they could go from B here up to A. And really, there's not too much for them to do. One thing I would love to see is for them to continue to release cameras that have 10-bit 4K, specifically their crop sensors. I would love to see an A6700 or something that shoots 4K in 10-bit. I'd also love to see a miniature FX3 with a crop sensor. Maybe they could call it something like the FS3 to go along with their FS Cinema line. Next, let's talk about Zcam and how they can go from all the way down there at D up to A. And Zcam is really unique. They kind of have their own thing going on, their own form factor, but I have a feeling they're going to get some more competition as Blackmagic makes changes and as other companies like Panasonic, who came out with a full frame boxy style camera, the BSH1. And I think they need to just clean up their post-production workflow, or heck, get bought by Blackmagic and just have Blackmagic pocket cinema cameras inside of Zcam's incredible bodies. Next, let's talk about Fujifilm moving from C up to A, and I think there's a couple interesting things they could do. Number one, again, I'd love to see better lenses when it comes to video autofocus, dealing with little bugs in the camera, making sure focus is super solid. But what would be really interesting is if they did something more cinema camera-like. Again, like some of these other companies, they don't have a video film department. They don't have camcorders, cinema cameras, things like that. So why not make one? Maybe they could take one of their medium format bodies, take their APS-C smaller sensor, stick it in that thing and just load it up with a bunch of yummy video specs and release something really interesting and unique. They have some incredible cinema lenses. Why not make a cinema camera? Then we have Blackmagic Design. To go from D up to A, there's a couple things I think Blackmagic could do. Number one, start with this form factor. Get rid of these giant, weird, wide bodies and give us something a little more interesting, a little more flexible, or maybe find a way to use their video recorder display as a way to control the camera. That way you can remove it if you don't need to control the camera directly, or you can add it on top, maybe something like what Red has done in the past with their cameras, where you just bolt it on the top and now you have a touch screen. I would love to see continuous video autofocus, but if Panasonic hasn't done it, I doubt we'll see that from Blackmagic anytime soon. And if anything, give us a better battery solution out of the box. A V-mount somewhere on the camera or larger battery, something would be great. And I know they have battery grips, but yeah, it makes it so tall and just super awkward. And last but not least, we have Team Red Canon. What could they do to go from B to A? In my opinion, it's pretty simple and something they seem very stubborn about. Number one, get rid of the 30-minute record time. What are we doing here? And finally, give us, a camera that doesn't overheat. And I've spoken to Canon people in the past, people that work at Canon, and they always at this point say, well, we have cinema cameras. Go buy our cinema cameras. These are DSLRs or mirrorless cameras for stills. And I somewhat understand that, but these days, these style of cameras are becoming cinema cameras. So that excuse doesn't really hold up anymore, in my opinion. These are now becoming cinema cameras. It's just a new form factor, a new style of body. So I really hope that in their next generation of mirrorless cameras, they stop overheating and they stop that stinking 30-minute record limit. So that is how I would rank all of these different camera manufacturers and how I think each of them could improve upon their current offerings. I would love to hear what you guys think of all of this below. How would you rank all of these different camera manufacturers? And if you enjoy these videos, make sure you subscribe. Also check out my camera guides, because most of the stuff you see on the table here, I've got a guide for it where we go in depth talking about the best settings for getting the highest video quality possible, including the new A7S III guide and the LUT pack for that and other cameras. And I've got more in the works. So that's going to wrap up this video. I want to thank you guys so much for watching. Hope you have a wonderful rest of your day, and we will see you in the next video.